These are the live pictures of the Gilets jaunes or Yellow Vest movement. It began as a protest about fuel tax rises. This week, the government of Edouard Philippe, the Prime Minister, announced that it would suspend that planned increase, which was due in January. Nonetheless, the protest does not appear to have dissipated. In expectation of trouble this weekend, police have mobilised 90,000 officers across the country, and the Interior Minister spoke yesterday of the protests having created a monster, and a monster it seems the authorities are not entirely sure they know how to control. You can see there are the use both of tear gas grenades and, as we saw over the last weekend, stun grenades as well to try and dissipate protests. Obviously, tear gas, the preferred option at this stage. These protests certainly don't look violent, but it is a question from the police's point of view of containing them. And the thing they always fear on the streets of in Paris is the erection of barricades, which obviously have such a resonance in French history, really, since the revolution back in 1789, and again through the Paris protests in 1870, various stages in the country, in the capital's history. The wide boulevards, of course, supposed to dissipate the risk of people being able to take control of the city. There was no question of that last weekend. What the police are particularly worried about, of course, is what they see as extremists infiltrating the movement. This is a movement that has no real leaders or organised structure. It's been able to mobilise quite effectively, not least through the use of social media. There are undoubtedly anarchists involved in some of the protests, far-right campaigners involved in some of the protests. So, as well as, however, a very solid body of people who might described as being in the middle on a lot of issues, who felt very motivated and angry about those tax rises, and a perception that the government of President Macron has been more interested in easing the tax burden on the wealthy than on ordinary French people. Now, that's a political debate we'll be taking up in Dateline here on the news channel in about 20 minutes' time. For now, though, let's hear from our correspondent who's in Paris, Hugh Schofield.
The numbers here are small. There are only a couple of thousand, 2,000 or 3,000 people, I would say, out here on the Champs-Élysées, and they are the real hard inner core of the Yellow Vest movement. And I guess what might happen over time is that hardcore begins to separate from the mass of people who support in a more pacific way the demands. That's certainly the hope of the government, that what happens today in Paris is isolated and visibly the work of a minority who are, they would say, no longer representative of the movement as a whole. Of course, I have to say the people around here would not agree with that. They see they're very, very much part of the movement as a whole.
That was Hugh Schofield talking to me an hour ago. This is the scene live now. You can see protesters covering their mouths as they try and get away from what I assume, and I can only say I assume at this stage, is tear gas being deployed by riot police. Again, it's about keeping the numbers spread out and keeping people moving, not allowing them to congregate, not allowing them to create possible sorts of unrest. One of my colleagues was saying that among the various signs and slogans and so on display, you could see a Breton flag, so you can see all the different elements of protest that can come together, a sort of anti-government feeling, and that feeling seems to be running quite high in France at the moment, not just in Paris itself. We've seen various other protests. Of course, there was quite a lot of controversy earlier in the week when a group of school children were photographed having been ordered by police to get down on their knees and have their hands behind their head. And one police officer was caught cracking a remark about what a well-behaved class they were, and some people felt that had been excessive behaviour by the police. The Interior Minister and others argued, though, that this was because adults had tried to infiltrate that protest, and the police were doing their best to prevent the situation getting out of hand. What everyone will be hoping for, it doesn't get as out of hand as it did last weekend, of course, in Paris, when we saw both vehicles set on fire, and of course there was fatality as well.